So I think all of that played into the fact that we really needed to be very methodical about this, and take some steps and learn, and take some steps and learn and grow from that. And that's again what we're doing, and we continue to do.
Welcome to 33 Tangents, a weekly podcast featuring a rotating panel of co-hosts that all work together in the same company but live in different areas of the world. The discussions cover a wide variety of topics, from digital analytics to working remotely to current happenings in business and technology. Our regular day-to-day conversations often go off in various directions, and the goal of this podcast is to share our ideas and find new ways to engage with others. So it went from like 90 some degrees yesterday to like rainy and 65 here today. And I've been dealing with sinus headaches all day because of just the rapid change in weather. Woke up with like a migraine today, and I've been fighting one for the better part of a day. Of the day. Fun. No, not at all.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's been cold. We had snow levels down around 6,500 feet, rain, cold, highs in the low 50s. So we can complain that we all don't live in San Diego.
Yeah. When I was in Florida over the weekend, I'll be honest with you, I'm actually kind of welcoming this, because when I was in Florida over the weekend, it was like 95 degrees. It was stifling hot, and at most times there was no breeze. So you just stood there and sweat, and October is supposed to be starting to cool off, but it's not like August where it's like walking on the sun there.
Yeah. How did the visit to Disney World go?
It was amazing.
That's what I was going to say. It's like, is it the greatest place on earth, or is there what? Because there's multiple locations. So,
the Disneyland in California is the happiest place on earth. I believe they call Disney World like the most magical place on earth.
Okay, you were at the magical place,
but with an infant. So the first time that way, right?
And yes, it was the first time with a kid, and he had an absolute blast. I mean, somehow we lucked out, and we have the most relaxed kid, and I hope he stays this way. He just goes with the flow with us, and he very rarely, gets cranky about it. He had an absolute blast. He enjoys fireworks. So he was, he's sitting there watching a couple of fireworks shows. Whirlwind trip. It was, we left Thursday evening and got back Monday night, and the weekend flew by. But then I checked my email on Tuesday, and I felt like I was after like a week or more.
That is awesome. I'm glad you're able to do that. Just wait until he's a teenager, and then he won't be agreeable. He won't want to do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That time is coming.
But as of right now, he's just a happy, chill kid that just goes along with his crazy parents. And we definitely wore him out. Like he was definitely out of sorts a bit on Tuesday when we got home. Like he was definitely out of sorts, and you could tell he was a little overtired. But other than that, it was actually a lot of fun taking a kid down. But again, he wasn't like 18 months old and trying to run everywhere.
Yeah. It's great.
So, but as people can hear, we have a different voice on the podcast with us this week. So Jason and I are joined by Carrie Bourke, who is the Director of Customer Analytics and Insight at Harvard Business Review. Carrie has been a partner of ours for 3+ years now, and watching some of the stuff that she's done at HBR, Jason and I have been dying to get her on to, for a chat. But prior to her time at HBR, Carrie has spent various roles in analytics leadership at companies such as Clario Analytics and Staples, where, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where you both first crossed paths.
That's true. That was a while ago.
That was. Yep.
But like I said, over the last 3 years, Carrie's been a partner of ours at HBR. And one of the things we've seen is during that time, she's taken a methodical approach to building out a digital marketing ecosystem, and one that follows a similar methodology that we preach, a crawl, walk, run methodology, and it's a methodology that typically runs counter to ones that most corporations or most organizations take. Carrie, in some of our previous chats, like I said, we've often run into a situation where we come in and do an assessment and we give a timeline like, this is something that's going to take 2 years to get where you want to. Doesn't mean you're not going to see anything for those 2 years. There's going to be features that we're going to unlock as the time goes on. But ultimately, to get to the endpoint where you want to be, it's going to take time. And one of a couple different things happens. Either leadership balks at that and says, nope, get it all done within a few months. And if you take that path, we've often seen that it results in something that's error prone, something that doesn't work. Or people become paralyzed by that kind of timeline and don't do anything. So then 2-3 years pass and they're no further along than where they were previously, because the thought of taking that kind of path just, it was intimidating. But I'm kind of curious. I kind of want to start this conversation with just kind of picking your brain. Like, what led you to take the approach that you did? Like I said, a very methodical approach and slowly unlocking features and capabilities to the organization versus trying to boil the ocean and get it all done at one time. And how did you sell your leadership on something like this?
Yeah, Jim, I think actually before I get into answering those questions, it probably would help if I spent a couple minutes talking about how we even got to the position of being able to decide if we were going to crawl, walk, run, or try to run in the first place.
Definitely.
So several years ago, we were in the third year of a 5-year contract with a third-party vendor who was hosting our marketing database. And this database had been built using name and address. It was primarily built with the focus of supporting our very strong direct mail, which was our key campaign strategy for driving subscriptions. But it had also, over the years, had been used to drive email, and we attempted to bring some web behavior in, but really were never able to get it to the point where we needed it to be with the business. So when we were in that third year, I really wanted to take a step back because I had heard the frustration of leadership. We're spending a lot of money for this solution and we're really not getting out of it what we had hoped. I personally and my team had been frustrated because we knew what the stakeholders wanted and needed, and we were having a hard time getting it. And so we decided to do an RFP to investigate different ways that we could, the way I kind of called it is to skinny down the database. What could we do to simplify our solution? And part of that, we actually partnered with Jason, who came in as an advisor to us to help us, I think, define this vision of this digital ecosystem, which was really about, get the database in place, but have it effectively connect to the website, to your targeting tools, to your ESP. And that really started the process. And when we did that, we met with our stakeholders, number of meetings and number of stakeholders. And what we came away with is we needed a more flexible solution. We needed to be able to personalize our newsletters and emails. We wanted to set up trigger campaigns. So it was the variety of those core things that we knew that we needed to do to move forward. And fortunately, through conversation and through research from our internal architectural team, we came away with a recommendation to purchase Adobe Campaign Standard. And one of the reasons that was a plus is that we already had Adobe Analytics and Adobe Target. So that became our next step, was to bring that in. And the idea behind that was to replace our customer database, but it also is an ESP. So at the same time, we were replacing our customer database and our ESP. So to get to your question about how we could sell leadership, I guess first, how could we sell leadership on this solution? Well, one is it had the promise of addressing these needs of our stakeholders. Secondly, it represented a significant decrease in cost so that we were able to redeploy that cost in other areas. So in terms of selling the solution, that I think was a fairly easy process, because I think we did our diligence to have the background to help explain it. Plus, we were easing historical frustration. But in terms of a crawl, walk, run approach, we are a very lean organization, as many are, and it would be very difficult for us to try to run quickly. And having bought expensive tools in the past here at HBR and not being able to run with them because we were typically in a self-service mode, I knew that we really needed to take a more methodical approach. So day one, we made sure that we were able to support the existing campaigns, those that were driving key revenue for subscriptions, product purchase, getting our newsletters out the door. And then we built strategy to try to roll out those other pieces. And we're still doing that 2 years later.
It's such a refreshing thing to hear. And one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you come on the podcast and share some of your vision and stories, because I think a lot of organizations can benefit from the decisions that you've made, some of the things that you've learned along the way, because so many companies out there, and honestly, it's just human nature, because I think as individuals, we kind of fall into this trap. I'm sure I have a closet full of things that I wanted to get into, and I went all out and got the top end stuff, and then I used it once or twice, and it's just sitting there.
Yeah.
But so many companies take that approach where they buy the best thing that's out there, and they just collect a whole bunch of things, and they're like, okay, now we're going to do whatever we're going to try to do. And unfortunately, it just ends up sitting on the shelf because there's no plan, there's no vision, they're overwhelmed. And so hearing that, a respected company, respected organization like Harvard Business Review is under your leadership, taking such a, I guess, measured approach to it, being deliberate in how you're rolling out your stack and your vision is very refreshing to hear.
Oh, thanks. I do have to point out, though, it definitely is a team. There's a team doing this because, my team focuses on the customer database and email operations, but we have another organization that's really focused on the web analytics and the site personalization. So all of those tools coming together, and of which obviously Jim works closely with us all. It's really the coming together of that all, and making sure we're taking those steps.
So what I'm interested in, I guess, some of your past experience, or maybe experience at HBR, or maybe I'll put you on the spot and say I want you to come up with an amazing analogy, since you've been climbing mountains, about how climbing a mountain is really similar to building a world-class marketing stack. But I would love to hear kind of what you feel like your past experience has been that has helped kind of inform some of the decision making that you've been making as you working with the team to deploy this vision at HBR.
Yeah, I think some of it is just what happened here in the first couple of years I was here. And, I think I've been told my role was actually created sort of around the frustration that we weren't getting value out of the marketing database, the early marketing database. So coming in on day one and knowing that we had this thing that we'd built and we just weren't getting everything out of it. So living with that for 2 years certainly put me in a position that I wanted to make sure that we did this incrementally. Secondly, related to that, I think we had several changes in web analytics, and web analytics is just so important to our world. We are a content site primarily, and we need to understand what our readers are reading, what they like, what they're doing, and then bring that into our analytics and our marketing and our targeting. So having moved from one provider to another provider, and with that comes understanding the whole tagging aspect. Again, I'll plug Jim for how wonderful he's been with helping us set up the data layer, but also the reporting aspect. Making sure that users understand how to use the reports, and so knowing that we'd already started investing in adoption of Adobe Analytics, and that the tool that we were going to put in place complemented that and actually spoke to it, and that we could use the skills that we were developing in Adobe Analytics to create segments and develop reporting. That was huge, that I think related to that decision. In terms of prior to Harvard, I was with a software company, a relatively small software company, and we sold marketing optimization, SaaS as a service. And I was on the client service side, but it was very interesting to me to see how we could go in and sell a product. You get the client very excited about the product, but then in terms of their adoption, it was very difficult. And to really get the full breadth of the value out of the solution that we were trying to sell, I was seeing it from the vendor side, so I had that perspective as well. So I think all of that played into the fact that we really needed to be very methodical about this, and take some steps and learn, and take some steps and learn and grow from that. And that's again what we're doing, and we continue to do.
That's awesome to hear. I think a big part of that is just I like that methodical approach of taking some steps, learning, adjusting, and going. It's okay to say that we don't have all the answers, and we're going to learn along the way. And I'm not sure where kind of business training or just business culture in general went off the rails, but so many people and organizations are afraid to admit that they don't have all the answers. And they go into these very, very complex situations. Building an ecosystem like this is extremely complicated, and going into it with the thought that we know exactly how this is going to work and we're not going to budge because we have all the answers, I think is really dangerous. And the fact that you're open to learning, I think, is a phenomenal approach that more organizations should be open to taking.
Yeah. Well, and also, don't you think it's also, I think we were talking about this the other day, that oftentimes vendors come in and they sell a solution, and today many of the marketing tools, the front end is just so user friendly that it makes it very appealing to marketers. And it's like, oh yeah, we can just take a few steps and we can personalize and we can target. But it's really what's behind the scenes and the connection of the products in order to get that data in a place you can use it. So you need to have, the strong technology team to support that, and that vision as well. So
Yeah,
I think it's critical.
it's an interesting thing to lay side by side, because you're right. As the solutions have matured, this freaking
I
fly,
see it.
right?
I've been watching it for the last few minutes crawl across your hat. I just didn't want to interrupt either of you.
So it's interesting to lay this side by side, because you're right. I mean, these technologies have become so polished over the years, and the one that really has become open to marketers is in the optimization space. To your point, it's so easy to pick up an Optimizely or a Google Optimize or an Adobe Target, and just start making changes to the websites. But optimization itself is probably one of the more complicated things, in that it involves so many different areas of the business, so much data, so much is needed to go into that. And so, having strong leadership to be able to take a step back and talk about, this is why, again, I'm going to use the word deliberate. This is why we're doing things deliberately. This is why we're doing things with a purpose, because you can take the wrapping off a tool and kind of play it out for a bit, and it's exciting. You get some incremental value, but it's over the long term where these solutions really start to pay off, and that's hard. It doesn't, you can't keep that. Oh my God, it's gonna drive me crazy. You can't keep that newness. You can't keep driven off of the newness. You have to find reasons to kind of keep, what's the right word? Like struggling. I don't want to say struggling, but it's hard, right? Like after the newness is worn off of a new solution, it's hard to kind of keep that momentum going.
Right, but I think if you establish the crawl, walk, run approach, and you have leadership buy-in, that with each incremental step, you're able to share something exciting. And sometimes it's not big, exciting things, but what we found, like we're introducing more trigger campaigns that are allowing us to talk to someone differently when they've done something on the site. I think that's exciting because it's something very tangible that people can see, and we can show how productivity from a triggered email differs from a batch email, or in personalizing things. And we're still moving, I'd say we're kind of crawling a little bit, teetling and walking, but we're starting to move that's exciting to be able to see how we can change content in that way. But so with the crawl, walk, run approach, you do get those exciting moments that it's important to share.
Yeah.
To keep
Yeah,
interest.
for sure. One of the things that I would love to talk about, and I hope this fits in with your topic, Jim, But one of the items that comes up a lot and we're hearing talked about, especially as we see a consolidation in the space, it's pretty clear that we're seeing a consolidation with a few big players, Adobe, Google, Salesforce. And then you have a whole host of kind of additional products that are out there that you can tie in, and it seems like new solutions being put on the market every week. The conversations that I hear are, do we go all in on a cloud solution? Do we go all in on a cloud solution and then append other solutions that align with what we're trying to do? Or do we piecemeal together independent offerings from across the board to build our system? You've kind of gone with the second approach, where you've gone pretty heavily in the Adobe Experience Cloud, but also have other solutions that best align with your goals and what you're trying to accomplish integrated into that ecosystem. I'm interested in kind of the thought process and pros and cons that you've seen of taking that approach and really investing heavily in one of the big cloud players.
Right. Well, I think one of the pluses, or two of the pluses I've already talked about, but one is the fact that we know that the connections between those products are they're built to be connected effectively, and if they're not, we know where to go. Like we go to Adobe and first go to Jam, but we go to Adobe, and and they will, if it's not something that they can fix, they get it on their roadmap, and we have some things we're waiting for, but for the most part, you have an audience. So I guess for me, that was one of the big pluses when we came up with this solution. The other is, as I mentioned, it's leveraging skills that you're building in one tool to use them in another, and Adobe Analytics is so critical to our solution. It's nice that they all talk to each other. The other, right now we're going through an implementation of Piano, which is a digital fulfillment platform, and so this is going to be an interesting, it's really the first product that we've layered on since we implemented Adobe Campaign that I've been involved with. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all fits together. And thus far, it seems pretty good. We haven't really started talking about Adobe data going back into Piano for targeting. I think we just had one conversation on that, but so that's kind of still out there. But so yeah, I think I was heavily I was definitely weighing to the side of let's use all the different pieces that fit together, that we know fit together. Probably the con from that is that you're reliant on the roadmap that Adobe has versus being able to go out and see what other groups, and I don't know if like other single platforms could invest more heavily in development of that specific platform. But to date, we haven't seen that. But again, we've only been there with them a couple of years with this full solution.
Awesome. So I have so many different ways I can take this, Jim. I don't want to dominate the conversation. So if you have questions, by all means jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to keep asking questions, and I'm going to keep batting this fly out of my view. So try not to react to and this is like the second or third episode that the fly has made an appearance. So people are going to think like either this is one like super fly, or Jason lives in some kind of barnyard that just has flies all over the place.
And it's funny, after the one episode where the fly kept getting you throughout the episode, I was talking to Bryant, and Bryant was saying how he was actually over and the fly was attacking you then as well.
Yeah.
Like this fly's got a vendetta against you. I'm leaning toward the super fly that just won't leave you alone.
It's absolutely amazing. And it's just one fly. It's not like there's like 50 flies in this office. It's one fly. And I think it's the same fly.
But does he only surface during podcasts?
Well, he only surfaces when other people are around. Like if I'm just in here hanging by myself, he's nowhere to be seen. But if I'm on camera, if I have a guest over, that fly is coming out.
He's social.
Very social. Maybe he just wants to be part of it. He's like, right. He's trying to develop a personal brand. He sees this as an opportunity to get some visibility. He's like, oh, the podcast is filming.
So he's made a presence.
And I think I've just found our cold open for the week. And I got to add this to the Jason versus the Fly super mix.
And if we had a designer on staff, I'm sure there would be a design logo or something in the works with the fly buzzing around my head. So, okay, so look, to get us back on topic here, maybe slightly related to that, but slightly off. I don't think I've ever asked you this, but I'm interested in how much the influence of higher education has on HBR. I mean, you're part of Harvard, but you're a separate business unit. You are a business. You have kind of a business focus, but you tend to take a very, again, I guess I'll say measured, deliberate approach to things. I'm wondering how much of that is the people that have been attracted to work at HBR, how much of that is the influence of being part of higher education, which may take a more measured approach to how they move forward in things. And I'm staying away from saying a slow, methodical approach, but a little bit, let's make sure we really think it out, where you have other businesses where it's like, I don't know, we'll just make decisions on the fly and figure out how to deal with it later.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I think about the environment we're in, and I've been here 5 years now, I think, we're doing very well. We're many smart people here, and great interest in the product we're delivering. But I feel we're somewhat of a patient environment as it relates to an environment like a Staples, which is highly promotional, and you just need to get those offers out there to drive revenue, and which is where I came from. So for me, I do see that I can describe this environment as a little more patient, and so a little more receptive to doing the crawl, walk, run strategy. Um, the influence of higher ed, it probably has some influence, but we have goals. We definitely have goals that we need to achieve for the business school. So I don't feel like we can take a step back there. But I think it's the balance. It's the balance of those goals, and it probably is the type of people that have been attracted. We have a lot of people who stayed here a long time, and I think it's leadership. I think we have some awesome leadership, and they've been in place for a number of years. And so I think they've developed this culture that is an attractive culture to work in.
Yeah. So I'm interested in how much of the decision making and what you're building out as part of the I don't know, whatever we're calling it, marketing ecosystem. How much of that is influencing other areas, and how much of that are the decisions you're making have those other areas in mind? So there are other organizations within Harvard Business Publishing where HBR sits, and you probably also have relationships with College of Business or other pieces within the university. How much of what you're doing is helping forming what they're doing, and how much of what you're doing from a decision making process has some of those other pieces that you connect with in mind?
Right. So I can speak to internally. So we have the three divisions: higher ed, corporate learning, and HBR. And last year, we established an analytic leadership community, which this is the first time we've had this. And it took us a while to get up and running, but now I think we have a good cadence where we come together every 2 weeks or so, and we're talking about kind of the strategy of each of the business units. What are the tools we're using? How can we have more synergy with tools? And we've definitely had some benefits in that decision area. And then how can we share best practices across the organizations? And that's actually part of our corporate goals this year. It's not just analytics, but across the organization. How can we share different competencies that the different business units have? So me specifically, I have some meetings set up to start sharing more on what we're doing in our triggered email program. I know a colleague of mine has done quite a bit more in terms of site personalization and testing and working in the other business units. I mean, Jim, I almost think you probably have some good perspective on that, having worked in higher ed and a bit in corporate learning.
Yeah, a little bit. No, I was going to say, and I also have, because I say this on every episode, Carrie just mentioned something where I'm like, you know what? This is going to be a great future podcast episode. So I have to mention that on every episode now. But the idea of having kind of a unified leadership group, or different organizations call it different things, center of excellence, what have you. It's something that's been talked about for many years, but I don't know of a lot of companies that have really put it into practice at great depth. And I think it's going to become more and more of an important discussion to have, whether it's, companies that we work with like Carnival Cruise Lines, that have lots of brands that we work with that operate as independent, separate companies, or just larger companies that have different divisions in it that have their own kind of vision and plan and kind of do their own things from a marketing analytics perspective. How do you kind of either manage that or have influence at a higher level? I think it's something that's really difficult to solve for, but as companies begin to solve for that, I think it's going to be a massive competitive advantage.
Yeah. And I think like when the organization, this community first started, it was like, okay, what are we doing here? Are we headed towards a centralized analytics team across the organization? And so I think at first it was like we weren't really sure about that. But as it progressed and we realized that um, the current structure right now is going to stay as it is, and that we have so much to learn from each other in different ways, and then just benefits from coordinating better on our tools. We had quite a few tools across the organization, which I don't think is or uncommon. So there definitely has been a lot of benefit there. And then taking it down a level, we actually have on the off week of the leadership meeting, there's a user community meeting. So we're having people get together and share. A lot of it thus far has been focused on tools like Alteryx and Tableau, but certainly can see opportunity in the future with Adobe Analytics for sure.
And is that all internal to HBR?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
How are you getting people interested
I'm
in
sorry, internal to HBP. So not,
HBP?
yeah, the whole organization. Yeah.
Got it. How are you getting people interested in participating in those? From past experience, we've seen those kind of take off with the initial bang and people really interested, and then it dwindles off. What has been your experience in keeping people interested in participating?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. So one is we do have an external consultant who has been with us to help us with we purchased Alteryx server, and his company are experts with Alteryx and then Tableau. So he's been helping us adopt that. So that's kind of the key driver. He manages those meetings with a internal partner every 2 weeks. So as teams, as individuals on teams across the 3 business units are trying to beef up their use of Alteryx, which is it's a very universal tool. They're excited, I think, to come because he's talking about specific techniques. It's like an open user group, and similarly with Tableau. And then it also provides an opportunity for people who have developed a report or analysis to share. So it kind of has that combined. I think some people come purely for learning. Other people come because it's an opportunity for them to share all the cool stuff they're doing. So,
Got it.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's been in existence for about 4 months, but thus far it seems to be having good traction.
Do you provide food?
They do. They do provide food. We know that here that yes, having lunch meetings and providing lunch and food is always a good thing.
Yeah. Um, what about externally? How much of what you're doing has been influenced by external, and how much do you participate in that? So, you're in Boston, which is very heavy with a lot of really well-known brands, also a pretty good tech scene. Also, I know you do a little bit with publishing. How much of what you're doing is being influenced or from what you're learning by either local meetups or things that you're following from the publishing industry?
Yeah, me personally, I am not as active out there in the Boston community as I probably should be. I have a long commute, so I tend to be eager to get home at the end of the day. I do think there are a number of people in the company who do partake in those. I tend to attend conferences when I can, and they aside from the Adobe Summit, I do enjoy the publisher conferences to hear more about, what our peers are doing. And I specifically am interested in the areas of, the advanced targeting and modeling, and how can we bring that into our solution. And so it's typically the companies like Wall Street Journal and the New York Times that are advanced in that area. But I think across our organization, they're very open for us participating in all of the above that you mentioned, so that we can get out there.
Yeah. How much can you talk about things that you're kind of seeing on the horizon of publishing? Because publishing in itself, and we had Todd from the Monitor on talking about publishing analytics, and it's a really interesting time in the publishing space where I think with Todd we talked about so many local newspapers and publications folding up. Organizations really struggling with pricing models, and do we give content away for free and gated, and how much of what you're building out is really kind of forward future proofing, kind of a fairly, and not necessarily from HBR perspective, but just the publishing industry as a whole right now, kind of in a very precarious time.
Right. So I think a big focus. Oh, sorry, you broke up a little bit there, but so I feel one of the ways we're addressing the challenges and the questions around a paywall is through Piano. Piano is going to provide us with the flexibility to modify our paywall based on who the user is. So when we get to the point where we're walking or jogging with Piano, we're going to have that capability. I mean, that's a big promise. So that is going to help us, definitely better manage the paywall. With that, as I think about the targeting, it's going to be how can we more effectively understand our user base and their likelihood to convert initially, and their likelihood to renew versus attrite, so that we can build up the targeting capabilities to be able to build that into how we manage the paywall. Again, that's something in the future. Also, there's a focus for us on communities. How can we build out communities, whether it's singular or plural, within our subscriber base, that helps to drive stronger engagement? And so, we have initiatives. I'm not specifically involved in any of those, but there are initiatives within the company to help build those out in the next year.
Got it. What advice would you have? And I guess either specifically for people that are in similar roles within maybe a publishing or a content organization, or maybe a better question is, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot in the market right now is people getting into roles where they're being asked to show the value of previously made decisions, meaning, companies have spent a lot on technology. We have a lot of solutions. And at one point in time, I think it was just okay. And it was accepted to say, we have these in place so we can check the box. And I don't think it's no longer okay to kind of take that stance. And companies are really looking for, well, what value are these solutions providing? And I think you've done a fantastic job in helping align not just the technologies and building a really solid ecosystem, but what we can now unlock with that. What advice would you have for someone in that position where they're being asked to say, how can we start to show value with this investment that we've made in technology?
Right. Well, I'll tell you an approach that we took. We started last year, and I think we'll definitely go forward with, and that's developing a data strategy that relates to what we've built. And this was something that last year my boss asked for us to develop, and I was so pleased when she did, because it took some thought and some iteration, but the resulting product was that it was something that it was a document that we could refer to that directly related to the value that we were going to get out of this solution. And not all of it is quantifiable. There can't necessarily be a KPI related to it. And then secondly, it definitely put guardrails on around the type of support that my team and others we could leverage this when we were getting requests from a variety of stakeholders to make sure that we were continuing to fall within the parameters and the guidelines of that data strategy. So for us last year, the key components were around marketing efficiency and effectiveness. So obviously we want to keep the campaigns flowing. They need to keep driving the kind of results or better than they had in the past. We knew we needed to use our new system, our data system, to support our ad sales group. They're out selling ads, they're out selling analytic service product. We needed to make sure that we could clearly and effectively identify groups of cohorts within our audience that had like specifically, are they CEOs? Yes, we have that. People self-report that. But what about topic interests? Are there ways for us to expand our audience of who's interested in technology besides people who sign up for the technology newsletter? So it was doing that kind of thing. The next facet was our audience identification and personalization. Huge nut to crack. But in this data strategy, we were able to set certain goals that would, again, relate to the crawl walk aspect of it, so that we had specific things we could focus on, which related to, and again, this is where Jim was huge in helping us, how can we get web behavior from analytics over into campaign? And we were able to make that happen, and now we are running with that. So that was a technique. Personalization, what needs to happen in order to start personalizing our newsletters? And even though we bought an Adobe, a fully connected Adobe product, we found that there are definitely challenges with that, and we're still working through our MVP on that. And then finally, the fourth pillar was really about segmentation, targets for new verticals. How can we use this new ecosystem to identify potential audiences for new products to be developed, new targets for our ad sales? So having those four pillars last year, I think really, and then being able to measure against that, measure quantitatively, but also qualitatively, I think helped us be able to demonstrate the value we got in year one.
Yeah,
And
that's,
then, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, and then this year we have the data strategy for year two. It's less detailed than last year, but it has, again, key aspects that move us along that crawl, walk, run line.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So how are you coming up with that? Is that kind of a collaborative effort with multiple stakeholders within the organization? Is there someone that's taking more of a leadership role, setting down kind of that strategy, and then everyone kind of aligns with that? I'm interested in kind of the internal structure of how that gets put in place.
Yeah, so the way, again, last year was our first year with it. So what happened last year is actually when Sarah, my boss, asked or suggested that we do this, I drafted the document. And, she and I had some back and forth to make sure that we felt it was reflective of all the things we knew. Obviously, she's coming in from a top-down perspective. She knows what she wants us to address. I was coming in from the bottom up, what I felt we could do. So we got that aligned, and then I shared it with the key stakeholders across the company, and basically got the buy-in for that. And again, it was a business unit goal, so it was important that we did have that buy-in. But as we were developing it, it wasn't like it was off base from all the things we'd heard when we were making the decision to go
Right.
with ACS in the first place.
Got it. So, and maybe you've already mentioned it, but I'm going to ask the question again. So now that you have this really solid connected system, and we'll just talk about the analytics or the Adobe space where you have your digital behavioral data through analytics. You can do personalization and testing through Target, and then you have your campaign management through Campaign, and then you have other systems built into that. You've mentioned things like being able to get the right content in front of people, better understand your consumers, maybe ideation around products. You also mentioned things around being able to be more reactive from a trigger standpoint to react to certain scenarios to get things in front of your readers. And maybe it's one of those things or a combination of those things. My question is, what are you most excited about in the next 12 months? Now that you've really put a tremendous amount of work into getting the system into the state it is, what is it going to enable that you're most excited about over the next year?
A couple things. So one is I want to make sure that we further develop our audience segmentation and targeting capabilities. And again, this is an area that Jim's working with us on, because today we're able to bring data into Adobe, and there's a bit of a lag. We're using one aspect, but there's new capabilities to actually bring it in and trigger email. Similarly, I want to be able to go the reverse. We're developing scoring algorithms in campaigns, such as something as basic as RFM for product purchase. I want to get that back out into the environment so we can use that for targeting on the site. So I think it's really about continuing to expand our targeting capabilities and make sure that my team and the team responsible for targeting on the site, that we're moving to optimize in every area possible. And there's still work to be done there, but we are starting to have conversations with the two groups about this. So I think there's that opportunity. The second is we have a big challenge in that we just keep sending out, or the past couple of years, sending out more and more emails. Like, we want our newsletter base to go up, but what we found is that we're continuing to layer on the commercial emails with declining open rates and click rates. So we've done a number of analytics to make the point that this needs to change, and we have a task force in place now across different stakeholders, and we come together and on a monthly basis and talk about the different strategies we're putting in place to try to change the direction of that. So reduce the volume in which we're hitting people, but maintain or improve the productivity. So I feel we have the foundation in place now, and we have the buy-in so that we are going to be able to move the needle this year, which is something we've been talking about for 4 years and just have never been able to move it because we didn't have the tools or the metrics. And then the next thing is just the whole piano implementation is exciting, and I'm excited to see how what we've built in Adobe can sync with it and just make it all that much more powerful. Because again, I feel some of the things Piano was talking about, and I see articles about targeting. I think it's one of those things. It's nice to talk about it, but we really got to get it to work.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to take some time, but I know we can get there.
So it sounds like you've prepared the field, you've sown the seeds, you've watered, you've weeded, and you can see harvest season coming up, and it's exciting that you're going to really start to see some of the fruits of the labors that have been over the past 3-4 years. It's a commitment, and I think it's definitely an exciting time to be able to see the output. And not that there hasn't been, I think, some low-hanging fruit along the way, but it sounds like you're at a point where it's a really pivotal point where you're really going to ramp up the value that the decisions that have been made. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to say to that, and we have stakeholders in place now who really, they understand how to use what we've put in place, and that's exciting too. So it's nice when you have partners who want to use what's here. So it's not just about us selling what's here.
Yeah,
It's really about that partnership, which is awesome.
it is. So many people want to be in your shoes.
Because when you don't have it, and I've been there many times, it's very challenging.
It is. That's I'm glad. That's awesome to hear. Okay, so my last question is, what lessons did you learn climbing mountains that you're applying to the business world?
I climbed one mountain, Jason.
Hey, come on!
Very proud of it.
That's awesome. And I know there's a lesson in there, and I know you've been meditating on it. So I want you to share what you learned that you're going to apply.
Well, I probably should have prepared more than I did, but I think you always need preparation before a big challenge, and whether that preparation is conscious or comes out of struggle, you need to have that preparation. So I think in the case of this change we made with the digital ecosystem, I think it came out of pain. It came out of a couple of years of just not being able to get what we needed and having to say, no, it doesn't work, having just all the challenges with the prior system. So definitely the preparation. And then I think the other aspect is that you're going to get to a point with most mountains, it might be easy going initially, like establishing requirements or whatever, but there's going to come this challenging incline where I think the term in hiking is scrambling. So you're kind of on all fours going over the rocks where that happens. And we certainly had that in the development process. I think most do. But once you get over that and you get to the summit, it feels awesome.
I
So,
love it.
I don't know,
I
does that
love
help?
it. It's amazing. I love it. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I think you have shared so much, and you have so much to share from your experience and things that you've been able to build. I'm confident that our listeners are going to walk away with several really strong nuggets of information to go back and use in what they're building. So I'm super happy you joined us. It's an honor to have you here. Jim, I don't know if I kind of dominated the conversation. I don't know if you have any last thoughts, but I thought this was a fantastic conversation.
No, it was wonderful to listen to. So don't worry about that. In fact, like you both had so much great stuff to say. I'm like, I'm going to sit back and not ruin this. But yeah, Carrie, again, just to echo Jason's thoughts, it was great to have you on. Definitely appreciate you taking the time to join us. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing this with everyone. I think there's a lot of good information here.
Great. Well, thank you. It was such a pleasure to do this, and I appreciate being asked. So thank you.
Cool.
Right.
I guess we'll talk with y'all later.
Yep. Catch everybody later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of 33 Tangents. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast aggregator so others can find us. If you would like to reach us, you can do so by emailing podcast@33sticks.com or on the web at 33tangents.33sticks.com. 33 Tangents is a production of 33 Sticks, an analytics boutique.